Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erin, and for today's video we are going to be doing something a little bit different than I've done in the past. I have been wanting to do some true crime videos for a while, and I decided that I was going to dive into that this week. So the first case that I'm going to be talking about is the case about Kendrick Johnson. Now, the reason I wanted to start with this case is because it's recently been reopened, and I'll get into that a little bit later. With that reopening, I thought it would be a good idea to bring some information about the case forward again. I'm not making this video to disrespect Kendrick's family or anybody that's been accused in this whole case. I just wanted to bring the information that I found forward and just make other people aware of the facts that are surrounding the case as it stands right now. And the reason I say that I'm not doing this to disrespect anybody is that this is a very controversial case, and you'll see why as I go through it. Me personally, I don't know what happened here, and as I go through the background of what actually happened, then you'll be able to decide for yourself what you think. So Kendrick Johnson was born on October 10th, 1995 to Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, and Jacqueline goes by Jackie. He was from Valdosta, Georgia. His parents described him as a quiet boy who loved sports, and they also explained that he tended to be a bit of a jokester and just a happy, all-around, joyful type of person. Kendrick went to Lowndes High School, which is in Lowndes County, Georgia, and he was 17 years old when this incident happened. As I said, Kendrick was an avid sports lover, and he loved to play basketball and football, according to his family. He even had dreams of going on to play college football and possibly get a scholarship to be able to do that. Unfortunately, he would never be able to fulfill those dreams because Kendrick was found deceased in a rolled-up wrestling mat on January 11th, 2013. Now, Kendrick was supposed to attend some type of after-school event, a sporting event, or something like that on January 10th, 2013. So his mom didn't think anything of it when he didn't come back from school right away. However, as the evening went on, she began to worry a little bit more because Kendrick never showed back up. So finally, around 10 o'clock on the night of the 10th, Kendrick's mom, Jackie, jumped in her car and drove to the high school to see if maybe Kendrick was still up there hanging out with some of his friends or if she would see him along the way. She looked around for Kendrick for a while and never was able to find him. So finally, around midnight, she went to the police department and reported Kendrick as a missing person. Fast forward to the next morning, Kendrick's mother, Jackie, got up and went to the school in order to hand out missing persons flyers at the school itself. And the people who were working at the school, various admins and such, were willing to help her hand out those flyers. But unfortunately, around 10:30 a.m., some students went into the gym and they noticed what they thought were a pair of socked feet sticking out of a rolled-up wrestling mat that had been propped up vertically that they had stored in the gym. At first, these students thought that maybe this was some type of joke that somebody was playing, that they had put the socks there to look like maybe somebody was stuck. They soon began to realize that this was not, in fact, a joke, and that there was actually a body inside of the wrestling mat. The mats were approximately 6 feet tall when they were stood up on end and about 3 feet wide. Now, obviously, after these students realized it was a body, they went and reported it to somebody. The school went on lockdown, and they began to do an investigation, call police, etc. Now, while this was all going on, Kendrick's mom, Jackie, was still at the school passing out those flyers. So this is how she learned that her son had been found, was through the lockdown. Now, when Kendrick was found, his body was not in good shape. He was found face down in the mat with his arms kind of pinned up behind him, facing toward his feet, which were obviously faced up. He had clearly been in this mat for a long time. There was blood and vomit and the smell of all that from him having been hung upside down in this mat for a long time. So obviously, if you're upside down for a long time, all your blood is going to start to pool. So like I said, Kendrick's body was not in good shape when he was found. Now, there were 2 pairs of shoes that were found by Kendrick, as well as a school book. And the reason I bring this up is it was not uncommon for athletes to store their shoes and such in these mats and around these mats, because apparently there weren't enough lockers or something for them to keep all of their stuff in there, so they utilized these mats to store their belongings. Now, like I said, there were 2 pairs of shoes that were found by Kendrick. One was actually on top of his legs by his feet. Then there was a shoe that was outside of the mat, as well as there was a shoe underneath where his head was in the hole in the mat. So the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called in to investigate this. They're otherwise known as the GBI. They had Kendrick's body sent to the state medical examiner's office in order to have an autopsy performed to determine his cause of death. Now, after the autopsy, the coroner had ruled the cause of death for Kendrick to be positional asphyxia. So essentially, he had suffocated because he was upside down in this mat. Now, as I said, it apparently was not uncommon for athletes to store their belongings in and around these mats. And apparently a student had come forward saying that he knew that Kendrick had kept a pair of shoes that he shared with him inside of the mat. So the thinking behind this was that this was just a tragic accident, and that Kendrick had gone in to get those shoes, and when he went to go get the shoes, he slid down inside the mat, and that's when he became stuck and could not get himself back out. Like I said, his arms were kind of pinned up behind his body, so it was as if he had slid into the mat. Now, I will say that the opening for this mat was not that big, so keep that in mind. I believe that I read that it was about 17.5 inches. So Kendrick was a fairly big guy. He was 17 years old and an athlete. So it would have been easy for him to get stuck if he had somehow accidentally slid himself into the mat trying to get these shoes. And that's ultimately what the Georgia Bureau of Investigation said is likely what had happened, was that this was just a tragic accident. Now, Jackie and Kenneth Johnson did not think that this was an accident right from the beginning. They did not believe that their son would attempt to store shoes in the mat, nor did they think that if he did store the shoes in the mat, that he would attempt to go in after them in that way. They figured that he'd probably lift up the mat to get these shoes out rather than trying to go in through the top. So the Johnsons decided to start their own private investigation. Funds were raised by various local groups and people, and eventually his body was exhumed from his grave on June 20th, 2013. Now, as I said, this was a private investigation, so they had hired a private pathologist whose name was Dr. William R. Anderson. Now, Dr. Anderson found a completely different cause of death for Kendrick. After performing the autopsy, Dr. Anderson found that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to Kendrick's neck. Specifically, the right side of the neck where your arteries meet. He said that there was a blow in that area and that it had affected those arteries and veins, and that is what caused Kendrick's heart to stop. Now, another strange discovery was made during this second autopsy. When the second pathologist went to go look at Kendrick's organs, he found that there weren't any organs left in his body. And in fact, where those organs would have been, there was crumpled up newspaper. Now, the funeral home that had received Kendrick's body after the initial autopsy was done said that they had never actually received the organs from the medical examiner's office. And the coroner said, who was the initial person that did the first autopsy, that these organs were not in Kendrick's body because they had been destroyed through natural processes. Now, it was not that much time from when Kendrick had disappeared to when he was found to when he was sent for autopsy. I don't know the exact amount of time, but I don't think that it was that long, so it's a little strange to think that in that short period of time that Kendrick's organs would have been destroyed through decomposition, because that's what it would mean by natural processes. Now, as far as the funeral home and the newspapers, while it is an old and antiquated way of filling voids in a body, it's not uncommon necessarily. It's kind of a cheap way of filling a void in a body so that any empty space in the body is filled, keeping the body's shape. The state looked into the funeral home, and while they said it was kind of distasteful to use the newspapers, i.e. it was cheap, that there was no wrongdoing there. Yes, they could have used better materials, but overall it was not something that was illegal to do. So the funeral home was cleared of any wrongdoing in this instance. Now, during this second autopsy, like I said, the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the right side of Kendrick's neck. That being said, the actual bruise and the spot where the pathologist said that this had happened by his carotid artery was actually a very small spot. It was only about an inch large, but he claimed that that could cause enough harm to cause Kendrick's heart to stop beating. There was inquiry to this pathologist about elaborating on that, and he never really did. Now, my understanding is, through some of the research that I did, that there's not a lot of factual evidence stating that a blow like that could cause death, but the pathologist was pretty insistent on that's how that had happened. But like I said, when he was asked to elaborate on it, he wouldn't. So there's that. However, after the second autopsy was done, there was a lot of outcry as to maybe this wasn't an accident. Now, as I said initially, when Kendrick was found, his body was in bad shape. Obviously, I won't be showing the pictures here. You can find pictures of the scene of the incident, as well as pictures of him before and after his first autopsy, should you choose to look for them. You can find them pretty easily, and I'll leave it at that. I will say, if you do go to look at these photos, you'll see the ones before his first autopsy, which his face is pretty messed up. Like I said, he had been hanging upside down in this mat for a while, so blood had pooled to the face and what have you. However, there is a second image that you'll see that's on some like signage and stuff that the family had, where his face looks a lot worse. However, this is after the autopsy was performed, so that could account for why it looks worse than it did when he was initially found. Now, Kendrick's family ended up filing a wrongful death lawsuit against the Lowndes County Board of Education. They said that their son was assaulted and that this was not an accident. Now, in this wrongful death suit, they never actually stated who they thought had assaulted their son, but they did insinuate that they felt that this was a race-based incident. They had cited previous instances where Kendrick had been assaulted previously by a white student. They also cited another specific attack that happened on a bus trip about 14 months before Kendrick's death, and stated that this was a student who had a history of provoking and attacking Kendrick at school. Essentially, the Johnsons believed that Kendrick had been assaulted. When he was assaulted, he passed away, and then his body was placed into the wrestling mat. Now, the boys that were being spoken about in this wrongful death suit were Brandon and Brian Bell. Now, both boys denied being involved in this incident at all. Now, the thing that caught some people's attention, however, was that their father, Rick Bell, was an FBI agent. So people began to speculate on maybe there was some type of cover-up going on here. So obviously there was a lot of speculation going on here that was involving these two boys. Now, Ebony magazine had hinted that the Bell boys were the potential suspects in this whole incident, but they never actually outright said their names. However, it was quite clear who they were talking about. And what ended up happening was the Bell family ended up suing Ebony magazine for $5 million. The Bell family stated that the boys had been harassed and bullied as a result of this article that pretty much insinuated that they were the suspects. Now, as I said, the boys have stated that they had nothing to do with this incident. However, that being said, they also were not cooperative with the investigation. And what I mean by that is that they just didn't want to be involved in it at all. Now, is that a little suspect? Absolutely. However, you have to remember that their father is an FBI agent. He knows how all of this works, and he may not have wanted his sons to be involved at all, knowing what could potentially happen. One of these boys ended up with a college football scholarship, and about a year later that scholarship ended up being revoked because the school didn't want a scholarship associated with somebody who could potentially be a murder suspect. Now, you have to go back to the whole premise of our justice system where people are innocent until they're proven guilty. There was no proof that these boys were involved in any way with Kendrick's death. And this is an example of how people's lives can be affected by something like this. Like I said, innocent until proven guilty. This young man's scholarship was taken away from him for the potential of being a murder suspect. You know, as of then, there was no proof of this, so really, should his scholarship have been taken away? Obviously, with that article going around, negative things were being spun out about the Bell boys because it was clear that that's who they were talking to. And this is an example of how stuff like that can get the rumor mill moving and can negatively affect people's lives. Another case that I'll eventually talk about is the case of Elisa Lam, and there was a Mexican death metal musician that had something similar happen to him with that case when he had nothing to do with it. Now, am I saying that these boys had absolutely nothing to do with this case? No, because I don't know. There's not evidence saying they did, but there's not any evidence that I can see saying that they didn't. There's just nothing right now. So I can't judge either way as to what I think about them being involved. Now, in January of 2015, the Johnson family ended up filing a $100 million lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, they alleged that the homicide of their son had been covered up. This lawsuit included 38 individuals. Those individuals included the Bells, local, state, and federal officials, the school superintendent, the crime lab, law enforcement agents, the city of Valdosta, the medical examiner, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Now, the county attorney in this lawsuit came back and said that this lawsuit was pretty much baseless. And honestly, they weren't wrong. There was no proof of a cover-up. All the things pointed to a tragic accident. That being said, the Department of Justice was also still investigating this case. In November of 2015, the Department of Justice moved to put a stay on the case. And essentially what a stay is that it would stop any further investigation or proceedings that had to do with the case. However, the Department of Justice was denied this motion, so they had to continue to investigate the case. Shortly after this, however, the Johnsons ended up dismissing their own lawsuit. And the reason that they stated that they dismissed the lawsuit was that they were hoping to be able to wait until the Department of Justice had finished up its investigation and then reopen the lawsuit once there was more information available. However, this kind of backfired on the Johnson family as they were subsequently sued for approximately $1,850,000 in attorney's fees as well as defamation of character. Now, on June 20th of 2016, so we're 3 years past the death of Kendrick at this point, the Department of Justice said that they were not going to be filing any criminal charges in the case of Kendrick Johnson. On August 10th, 2017, the Johnsons were ordered to pay more than $282,000 in legal fees to the people that they had accused in their initial lawsuit. Now, in June of 2018, the Johnson family did have Kendrick's body exhumed a second time to perform a third autopsy. The only information that I could find about that third autopsy was that in addition to the blunt force trauma on the right side of his neck, that now included some type of blunt force trauma to his right chest as well. Now, this exhumation all stemmed from on February 9th of 2018. The Johnsons say they had a witness that came up to them that said an acquaintance of the witness had confessed that another person had in fact killed Kendrick. So as I said, in 2016, the Department of Justice had essentially closed its investigation on Kendrick. They did not file any criminal charges. They pretty much stipulated as well that this was just a tragic accident. And that's the thing with this case, is it's been two sides against each other. There are the ones that are from the state and such vehemently stating that this was an accident. Kendrick went in after his shoe, he got stuck, and that's the end of the story. And then you have the Johnsons saying that no, that's not what happened, that this is a cover-up of some sort. Now, is there glaring evidence that this is a cover-up? Not to my knowledge. That being said, I'm also not saying that there wasn't a cover-up. And what I mean by that is, excuse my French, but the scene of this incident was kind of a shit show. Obviously, the students that found him, they didn't know any better. They had ended up tipping that mat when they realized that there was a body in it. So you kind of have, if this was a crime scene, it was messed up from the get-go. Nothing was taped off. You had law enforcement officials and other different officials going around this scene without shoe covers or anything on. So if it was a crime scene, it was kind of, for lack of better words, it was messed up because it wasn't treated as a crime scene, if that makes sense. Now, I understand why they wouldn't have treated it as a crime scene as well, although I feel like law enforcement back then and even at this point, you should err on the side of caution, and you should probably just treat everything as if it is a crime scene, and then when it's not, it's not. But truly, who knows what evidence that could have potentially pointed this to being a crime rather than an accident had been messed up due to all the stuff going on at the scene at the time when he was found. Now, does that necessarily mean this is a cover-up? Like I said, no. Some other things have been brought up, though, that have made people question about maybe there is, in fact, a cover-up going on. One of the big things is the surveillance footage that was found. The last video footage showing Kendrick in the gym is around 1 o'clock, and he's not seen coming back out, so they think that that's around the time that he had probably ended up somehow in this wrestling mat. As I stated, the surveillance footage that was given, it had appeared on CNN and what have you, and the general gist of what they were saying was that there were a ton of corrupt files, there were missing pieces in the surveillance. Now, with this surveillance footage, there were literally hundreds of hours of footage that needed to be gone through. As I said, around 1 o'clock, you could see Johnson running into the gym toward the back side of the gym, and it's just a little quick blip of him going across the bottom of the gymnasium while some other students play basketball. Apparently, there was a camera that was on the mats, but the camera was blurry and not working. There were sections of video that was missing. So, for example, there were 2 cameras that were missing about 2 hours and 10 minutes of footage, and the footage that was turned in to be examined, and they didn't start recording until about 1:15 and 1:16, which is after when Kendrick had entered this gym. The Johnsons have alleged that maybe this camera footage has been tampered with, which I'm not going to include the footage here just because I'm afraid of copyright strikes and such, but the footage is easy to find if you want to go look for it, and you can see that there are jumps like in timestamps and such. It also appears like students are there and then not there and then there again, stuff like that. So I can see where they would find that this surveillance footage was sketchy, because it kind of was. That being said, though, I guess the basis behind that was that these were not the original files that were given, so there could be parts missing or something like that. I honestly didn't delve too much into it. I just know that looking at it from the CNN article, the surveillance footage does look pretty sketch. There was blood that was found on the gymnasium wall. Now, this was not really looked into because they tested the blood and they said that it wasn't Kendrick's, so they didn't go any further with it, which does but doesn't make sense to me. The reason I say it does make sense is because weird things happen in gyms all the time. People get hurt. Maybe somebody had gotten hurt and it was old, dried blood. It is weird though because this could potentially have been a crime scene, so maybe you'd want to find out whose blood it was and they could explain why it would be there. And one of the final things that a lot of people say, clearly in the surveillance footage, like I said, there are other students that are playing basketball around the time that they think that Kendrick had ended up in the mat. So if he had accidentally fallen headfirst into this mat, why would have nobody heard him screaming for help to get out? Because clearly he would have realized he was in a bad situation, so wouldn't you think he would scream for help? The flip side of that is that had Kendrick been as far down in that mat as he was, his screams would have been pretty darn muffled. Because if you think about it, the mat is rolled up, it's thick as it is. He is stuck in the mat. So there's not a lot of ways for sound to get up and out of the hole that he's stuck in. But, again, like I said, there were other students in the gym, so wouldn't you think that somebody would have seen him fall in to the mat? I mean, maybe they didn't, but like I said, there were other students in there, so you would think that somebody would have seen what had happened. But maybe not. Some other speculation is that maybe there had been some type of beef between Kendrick and one of the bellboys as well. So speculation that there was some type of drama about a girl, that perhaps there was some type of altercation, Kendrick was hurt, and then after the altercation and Kendrick was hurt, that he was placed into the mat. Like I said, a lot of people are saying that there's no way that Kendrick would have fallen into the mat because the width of the hole itself was only about 17 inches, which is why he would have ended up getting stuck. So they feel like maybe he had been wrapped up in the mat. Now, as I stated in the beginning of the video, this case has been reopened as of this month, March 2021. The case was reopened by the Sheriff's Department after the Sheriff's Department finally received the documents that the Department of Justice had in regards to their investigation that they had closed in 2016. The Johnson family, as well as the Sheriff's Department, did have a tough time getting these documents into their hands to reopen this case, essentially. Now, there's not a lot of information other than that they're reopening the case. The Sheriff's Department has said that there is a lot of evidence and what have you from this investigation to go through, so it's likely going to be at least a 6-month process before they can move forward or come forward with anything else regarding the case. So, will definitely be interesting to see what they come up with between now and then. Like I said, it's going to be a long process, so I don't expect we'll get answers right away, but I do find it interesting that this case was opened back up. I feel that there has to be a reason why they would have reopened the case. Maybe they're not going to tell us right now, but maybe there is something there that does point to this being a crime rather than an accident. And as I stated in the beginning of this video, I'm not sure what to think. I can see things pointing in both directions. I can see how this could have been just a terrible, tragic accident. I can also see how things were messed up and that it could potentially point to some cover-up and maybe there was a crime. I don't know. I don't know what to think. The whole thing is just sketchy either way to me. What do you guys think? Do you think that this was an accident? Do you think that this was a crime that had occurred? What I will say regarding if this was a crime is that I don't think that somebody outright was dead set on murdering Kendrick that day. I think that maybe if it was a crime, what happened was some type of altercation had occurred. Obviously, Kendrick was injured severely to the point where he had passed away, and that the person just tried to cover their tracks. I don't think that it was anything where they intentionally, like, stuffed him in the mat to cause him to die. The other thing that I think could have happened was maybe this was a prank gone wrong. Maybe they were like, oh, funny, haha, let's put Kendrick in the mat, and didn't realize that he was stuck. Maybe they thought that he could get out. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what to think about this whole thing. There's definitely signs that could be an accident, but there's also some signs that point to maybe this wasn't an accident. Not an accident in the sense of Kendrick getting stuck accident, if that makes any sense. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I hope I did this whole case justice. Like I said, it's my first delve into this whole realm of YouTube, so we'll see how it goes. And like I said in the beginning too, I did not make this video to disrespect anybody on either side of this, just to bring forward the facts that I had found regarding the case. And I thought it was very interesting that this had just recently been reopened, so I thought it would be good to bring it to the forefront so people knew more about it. But yeah, if you like this video, please give me a big old thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button down below, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!